Okay, so hopefully I'm audible to everyone. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so as you were aware that today's topic will be the history of art, and we are also going to discuss some parts of Indian craft and embroidery. However, today we'll just focus on the history of art, and tomorrow we'll discuss the embroidery part. So hopefully we have students from the bachelor and master, both the batches. Any student from the master's batch?
Yes,
No
sir.
one from the, okay, you're there. One student, okay. So is there anyone who comes from fine arts background? Or anyone who has been taught fine arts at school level, or anyone who had some kind of fine arts course or something? No one. Okay, fine. So in case you're not aware of the basic aspects of art, um, and if you get confused, just let me know that this is the terminology that you're not getting. So I'll be clarifying upon that, because while we are digging into the history of art, we'll be coming across with a lot of new terms which you might find weird, but it is there for if you look into the entire syllabus, it is there, and they're having real good importance. So if there's something complex, just let me know. So in today's presentation, we'll be holistically cover these three aspects. However, history of art is a huge thing. It is very difficult to put it in a within a 2 hours class. However, from your entrance perspective, we'll touch upon the areas which often required to get a good rank, or mostly question comes from such areas. We'll be focusing on them. So firstly, we'll be talking about what is art and its purposes, its function. Secondly, we are going to discuss the fundamentals of interpretation, formal and contextual analysis. Thirdly, we'll be talking about some application of principle of design and style, which are appended on various types of art along various edges. And lastly, we'll be discussing the various phases of art and some of the known artists and some of their works. Now, this particular chapter is very important, especially for NID. In SEED, UCEED also there is a certain level of importance, but for NIFT and NID it is even more important. And here you have got two aspects. First is you need to remember certain theoretical portions, and the second thing is you will also require to remember things visually. Like I'll be showing you couple of pictures, couple of paintings. I'll be showing you the pictures of couple of painters, artists, sculptors, and you will require to remember their faces, even their works, even the categorization or what kind of tag has been added. So those things are there. So this is something that I think is good to start with, is known to everyone, which is Mona Lisa, and it was painted by Da Vinci. Now, can anyone tell me in which country Vinci belonged to? What is the name of the country?
It's not France.
No.
He's
Italy.
Italian. Italy.
Yes, Italy. So now, as I had already discussed briefly about Vinci, so while we are coming across the famous paintings, we'll be just briefly discussing about the painter or the artist. Now, Vinci was a polymath, Now, who is a polymath? A polymath is someone who is good at a lot of things. Vinci was a mathematician, he was a sculptor, he was a designer, he was an artist, he was an architect, he was also an engineer and a technologist. We found certain drawings where Vinci actually ideated an aeroplane. We found drawings where Vinci identified human anatomy in a greater detail. So some people also said that Vinci was also a biologist. So whatever area of science and fundamental art were there in that particular era, Vinci actually digged into all of them. And hence Vinci is known as the polymath. And does anyone have any idea about what is the importance of Mona Lisa? Why suddenly this is so famous? What is so special in it?
Because it feels like that she's watching you from any angle we saw her.
Yeah, one of the correct answers. What else?
Because of her smile.
Yes, second correct answer. What else?
So because of the type of artwork it is. It's very soft and pleasant to look at.
Yeah, that's basic. That's basic tempera. What they used to do at that point of time. That's fine. I mean, if you look at any of the tempera, which is essentially done using opaque medium, it is soft. So that is one of the common answer. But the first two answers which they have given is the actual reason. So back then, it was very difficult to capture real-time human emotion within canvases. These days it is readily available. You'll find majority of the artists are actually doing this. But if you look at that particular era, which is 1503, which is much beyond, you will find that it was very difficult. If you look at the Indian paintings of this particular era, here painters didn't even have any idea about what kind of realistic facial structure, anatomy, study of bone structure. People have no idea here. But in Western countries, since the very beginning, they are very realistic about what they're going to interpret. Here, in India, we focused mostly on symbolic expression. We never cared about that a human figure should actually look like an actual human figure. Rather, we had gone for the symbolic expressions. But if you look back in Germany, in Italy, so Rome was the hub of this entire art revolution. So you'll find all the countries around Rome, they have done a real good job in terms of realistic expression. So capturing the smile and the kind of mysterious look that Mona Lisa has, it was a very difficult task. And to be able to do that, one needs to study the facial structure, rather the structure of the skull, the structure of the human skull, and how emotions are formed, how when someone smiles or when someone cries, just like you all read the chapter animation and you study about the changing position of the eyebrows or the cheekbones and how the size and opening of the lips, everything changes along with the altering emotions. Back then, it was really tough to understand. So Vinci actually dissected human bodies, just like people in those who were studying MBBS, just like they do. Vinci actually took off dead bodies and he dissected dead bodies. He actually looked into the bone structure to understand the anatomy. So that was the level of intricacy. And this is the product, Mona Lisa, which actually astonished everyone at that point of time. It was obviously tempera using an oil, which is an opaque medium, which is done on oil on poplar. Now, this belongs to Claude Monet. Claude Monet is an impressionist. Impressionism is a category of fine arts, and this painting is again very famous. So these days, one type of question is very famous in your entrance exams. They will put you two tables. recently in last year's CEED also, and even in UCEED also, they have given something similar. So in one side of the table, you have either the name of the artist or some kind of feature, and the right hand side you have the painting. So you have to tally that entire table, and you have to pick the right interlinkage of the connection. Sometimes what they do, sometimes in the left hand side also, they put 4 different figures, 4 different paintings, and in the right hand side also they put 4 or 5 different paintings, and you as a design aspirant, you are asked to match the similar style of paintings, right? So in that case, that is the actual learning of this class. You're not supposed to mug up just the name of the artist and the name of the painting. You're actually required to look into the painting to understand the essence, what kind of color is being used, what is the character or nature of the brush strokes, whether it is any theme-based work, like if you look at the Chinese and Japanese watercolors, they're mostly landscape works. If you look into the Roman sculptors, they're mostly focused on intricate anatomy, right? If you look at the modernist works, they are mostly geometric. If you look at some of the postmodern work, they can be organic as well as geometric, right? So you need to look into those paintings and you need to capture the essence in such a way that if 3 or 4 paintings have been shown to you, you still be able to recognize that, okay, this 2 painting belongs to one single style, or these 2 paintings have been done by one single artist, because it is not possible to visually remember all the painting of any particular artist. You might remember 5 topmost or 5 most popular painting of any particular artist, but that artist may have done 100 of other works. So it is not possible. So it is always easier for you to understand the essence, the technique, the dynamics, the pattern, the quality of the work, the theme of the work, using which you can identify, you can have some kind of guess that this artwork belongs to this particular artist. So Claude Monet made this. So why am I showing this picture? So that you can actually look into this and understand the essence. So you will find Claude Monet mostly walks into the landscapes, and since Impressionism talks about using bright colors, it is there, and sometimes it has some level of detailing, but mostly it is based on landscape. Again, this is done by Andy Warhol, and this is the famous Superman poster, and which was a screen print. It looks like it is printed using a printer, but it is not. It is actually manually prepared in 1961. Now the question is, what is art? Now, art has no definition. Okay,
Excuse
if
me,
you
sir.
actually,
Sir,
sorry,
the previous painting you showed us, was it an example of pop art?
you can say it is a mixed example of pop art, but we'll come to the classification later on. But it is a
Okay, sir.
mixed example of proper pop art and printing media.
Okay, sir.
So if you ask about what is art, practically art has no definition. I had been a fine art student before I switched to architecture. So, and still I have been a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts UK. So I have been attending a lot of international seminars and exhibitions, and the definition of art is still something which is people are currently exploring upon, and it will be a never-ending process, because art as a creative medium has no boundary, no limitation. So you might come up with your own definition, set of ideologies, which might not fit for somebody else, but that doesn't mean your definition is wrong, because art is a subjective thing, and 100 of different things can coexist at the same time, even though they are not mutually compatible. But to put it in a very simple word, art is the quality, production, or the expression of what is beautiful, appealing, or of more than the ordinary significance. Some people say art is a mode of communication. Some people say art is a way of expression. Some people say the art is the way you live your life. And some people say art is something which cannot be expressed by words. So there are a lot of explanations. But when we come to the work of art, it specifically talks about the visual expression of an idea, which is the area that we are concerned about as a designer. That in fine art it is quite vast, but when we talk about design, there are a lot of application of art in design. Art as a tool, it helps you to harness your creativity every single day as a designer. But when you do rendering in design, suppose you're a product designer, you are rendering some product, you're coloring it, or you're doing something else, you need to know some basics of art so that you are able to visually express what you are thinking of. Otherwise, whatever idea you have, you will not be able to put them in a piece of paper. And unless and until you put your idea in a piece of paper, no one will value it, because what you know, that's in your brain, in your mind. But unless and until you show it to someone else, they will not understand. And that is where lies the importance of visual expression in design. And thirdly, we have mediums. So you all are aware that there are various different mediums. And again, this is a matter of experiment. I have seen people painting on plastic sheets. I have seen people painting on marble. People do paint on leather, wood, whatever. Literally, there is nothing that you cannot use as a base or a base of painting. And same goes with medium also. There is mainly, we can divide medium into aqua based transparent medium, and then we have the opaque media. So aqua based medium means watercolor, or even there are certain other alcohol based color which is again transparent. Like if we talk about the Copic markers or the alcoholic markers, which gives you a very similar outlook of watercolor, they are again transparent. Now, when we talk about the opaque media, we have the gouache, we have the tempera, we have the oil paintings, and they have different bases. Sometimes they have the egg white, sometimes they have some kind of vegetable oil, right? And then there we have acrylic, which is actually an omnipresent thing. It is having a kind of ambiguous character. You can use acrylic as a transparent media. You can also use acrylic as a opaque media. So that is again open to experiment. So this is what we have already talked about. Apart from this, we have enamel, is again another opaque media. We have the gesso, we have glaze, we have ink. Pen and ink is there. Then these are the bases, right? So these are some of the conventional bases, but you can literally paint on whatever you want. But the question is stability, right? Whether you will be able to frame it. If you're painting on a huge rock, you will not be able to paint it. But if you are painting on a small piece of leather, you can actually frame that. So depending upon your need, context, and purpose, you can choose the various bases which are used in painting. Apart from that, we have chalk, pastel, charcoal, colored pencil, marker, oil pastel, pen and ink, etc. Now, when we talk about the sculpture materials, we have bead, clay, we have other found objects like jewel, marble, metals, the paper mesh, plaster, plastic, etc. Now, this is something you all are aware of. Some of you are also pretty good at watercolor. So this is one famous watercolor done by the Thomas Girton. And if you are actually into fine arts, you will find that watercolor and the opaque media, the transparent media and the opaque media, they actually do share some opposite characteristics. In watercolor, you need to visualize the entire thing prior to the beginning of your execution. In oil pastel, it is a journey-based process. In oil color, not oil pastel, In oil, it is a journey-based process. As you are going in your journey, even if you're committing some mistake, there are chances you can change it. And so it is a long process. But in watercolor, it's a very short process, and there are very less scope of changes. Once it is gone, it is over. That is another reason people have to be very cautious when they are doing rendering in case of any design stuff. Now, we are slowly coming to the history of art. So here, so we are not going to talk about what is history, that is already there. Now we will find economic influences, various historical events, and how they have influenced the development of the history of art. We'll also find various social dynamics, religious, spiritual influences, and even the technological influences. Now, what is the purpose and functions of art? Right, the key function of art is communication. And probably the best example is a poster, or you can also take these glass paintings that you find in the churches. That it is based on the Gospels or the life of the Christ, because it is easier to spread the stories through visuals. It is far difficult to actually read Bible and to grasp whatever is written there. If it is visually done, those who are not able to read, those who don't understand a particular language, still they will be able to understand it properly, right? So the main key is communication. If art is done properly, it will help you in communication. Same goes with posters. If you have written 3 lines, people might not understand it. If suppose you are showing some poster written in Chinese in France, nobody will understand. But if there is a very strong visual, then people will understand. So when you actually make a poster in your design entrance exam, and when we are asked to mark those posters, we mark it on the basis of the dependency, how much your visual is dependent on your text. If you have made your poster in such a way that if I show it to an illiterate person and the person is still able to understand what you're trying to communicate or interpret, you'll get more marks. So it is about the dependency of the graphics that you have drawn over the piece of text that you have added. So I have seen some posters where people have written a paragraph and the graphics is very confusing. So they will get less mark. If your graphics is very strong, and you'll find that all the modern posters have max to max, they're having 4 to 5 words, not more than that. So those are the actual purposes. Again, spiritual sustenance is there, right? So this is a very well-known thing. So can anyone say what is this exactly and where is it located? Has anyone
UK.
seen this before? Yes. You might have seen it from the top, but this is the 3D view. So this is the famous Stonehenge. It is in the UK, and this is something which is very mysterious, and it was done many years back, probably 400 500 years back. And here you actually have the monolith. These single stones are known as monoliths, single freestanding stones, and then you have some kind of horizontal member over it. And the stones are actually very high. It is almost around 15 to 25 meter. So if I do a comparison, a 25-meter height is almost around a 7-story building, 7 or 8-story building. And over those stones, they actually put this thing, right? And it was found by the historians and the archaeologists that this happened to be a religious structure. So back then, no proper form of religion was there. So people used to worship the natural forces, and this was a form of worshipping. And some people also say that it was absolutely not possible back then to lift these huge stones at a height of 25 meters. They did not have any crane or anything like that. So some people at NASA, they're still investigating on this, and they suspect that there is some extraterrestrial alienistic connection with this entire structure, just like people are investigating on the Great Pyramid of Egypt. So this was a piece of artwork, rather a piece of sculpture, which had a major religious influence. Even if you visit in the tribal areas, if you go to Andaman or in Africa or in Papua New Guinea, you will find that there are some very raw basic stones placed over each other. It is there, and they actually believe this to be something very holy, and they worship it. So this is how one form of art also came into place. Now, we also had certain aspects like personal and cultural expression. For example, the kings and the influential people, the rich sect of the society, they very much love to document themselves and their family members. So whenever there is a function, a family function or anything, they used to call the painters and they used to make their portraits. So that gave birth to a different genre in the history of art. Then we had the social and political purposes. Social purposes we're not going into detail, but by then simultaneously a lot of social movements were taking place. Like we had art and craft movement, we had the modernism movement, we had the Bauhaus movement. So each time there was a particular ideology. Beyond every movement there has to be an ideology. So for that particular sector of time, art got influenced by the simultaneous ideology, and there are certain changes which have been observed. And political pressure is there. Ultimately, artists are getting paid by the king and the rich people, so it is seen everywhere. The rich people are going to set the narrative, and even in history it is evidently found that there were some king who was actually not very good in reality, but the king wanted his future generation to cherish him, to remember him to be a very good person. So even when he was very cruel and brutal to his people, he paid a lot of money to the historians and the painters, and they have painted very positive things about his kingdom, and the historians and have written very positive things. So a lot of manipulations actually played back then, which again made the background for the evolution of art. So these are some of the examples. This is done by the Paul Reverie, which shows some kind of social tension is going on. This is one landscape done by the Le Levaux, and it is the famous French gardening. Now we have certain fundamental aspect, like art is basically divided into form and content. So form basically defines the theme, what under which theme this comes, it belongs to, and content speaks about whether it's a landscape or a portrait or any other kind of form of work. Now, if we talk about the formal analysis of painting, these are the few basic things that we can find. And if you have attended the class on the elements of design, you will actually know that most of these things have been covered in the elements. And whatever we have taught there, if you remember things, you can actually analyze the paintings on basis of line, the type of shape, the type of color, texture, space, mass, composition, and different type of scale factors. So we are not going to discuss this part in detail. Rather, we will look into the examples and we'll try to understand. For example, this is one of the very known thing done by the Michelangelo, who was a Roman painter, now Italy. Back then it was known as the Roman Empire. So here it is one of the first paintings where he actually brought the concept of angular perspective or the linear perspective. It is one of the first paintings, and it actually took around 100 to 150 years for these people to formulate how to achieve a flawless perspective. These days it is easy. We all know that we have some number of VPs, we have to draw it like that. But back then, perspective is actually a mathematical formulation. So mathematicians were working on perspective, and they got associated with sculptors, and finally they gave birth to perspective, rather the first part of perspective, which is the angular or the linear perspective. And this is what something they have come up with. And if you look into this, you'll find this is an 1-point perspective. Secondly, we have color. So these parts have already been discussed, so I'm not going to repeat this. Use of various hues and various saturation used to vary depending upon the theme of the painting. So for example, if you look at these 3 phases, you will remember that the color values are slowly changing. Here you have only 2 values, whereas here you have 3, and here you can see 5. So as I'm increasing the number of values, it is becoming more realistic. So this is again one part of the linear perspective, and along with the linear perspective, you can also see that intricate detail has been maintained for the human figures as well. Even texture, use of texture was there. Now, what is the primary function of using texture? The function is to express the material surface in a more realistic way. Let's say you are drawing a brick wall and you are also drawing a wooden surface. Texture is the key component which is going to visually differentiate. So if you know how to express texture visually in a better way, your work will be something very relatable or very realistic. And the same thing happens when you actually render products manually. Those who understand things well, like if it is a metal surface, I know that there will be a certain amount of reflection and I will have to leave certain white part in a linear format depending upon the external shape of the product. If it is a leather product, then the outside, if it is polished enough, it will be shiny, but not as much shiny as a metal surface or a glass surface. If it is a stone thing, then it will have a matte finish and it will not having any kind of reflection on it. So me as an artist or a designer, I need to understand what kind of surface texture or property this will have, and depending upon it, a lot of intricacy can be added. Apart from that, we have space and masses. Even you can look at the scale. This person is actually sitting in front, nearer to the observer, so the scale factor is more. This appears to be bigger than the people who are actually standing at a certain distance. And this is a very important thing in perspective, which is really missing in Indian context. If you look at the older Mughal paintings or Rajputana painting, you'll find that someone who's standing in front of you is also having the same height, and someone who's standing away from you, the height remains the same. There is absolutely no concept of spatial distancing. So that was one important aspect. So currently we are talking about the Roman art era, right? So they gave birth to the perspective. They digged into detail in terms of scale factor and even anatomy. They are very good at analyzing the anatomy. So these are again some examples on perspective. Even the use of techniques like foreshortening, where they have actually played with various angles. In terms of cinematography, you can compare it with the camera angles. In terms of a viewer, you can compare with positioning of eye at various strategic areas. Right, so here it was a very difficult thing. You actually sit, let's say someone is laying like this and you are actually sitting there, and if you try to draw that entire thing, you initially will struggle with perspective, right? Because the angle is very much shorter here, but it was done precisely back then, which is known as foreshortening. Then composition. So composition plays an important role in the landscape paintings, mostly because you have so many elements to deal with. And when it comes to portrait, mainly they have followed the rule of third, which is again a product of golden ratio. Scale is something that we have already discussed. Movement. So sometimes some painters, like some of the Italian painters like Salvador Dali, and there are many other surrealist painters, they actually looked into the elusive aspect of it. So we have discussed some of it while we are studying the Gestal's principle. We saw that how figure and ground, how tessellation, how the law of proximity can give birth to some kind of movement, some kind of visual dynamism. And by creating some kind of illusion, they were able to catch viewers' attention. Now, it is very easy for us to understand. Back then, in the medieval age, the success of a particular painting lied in the amount of attention span you're sharing for that particular work. Let's say you are visiting an exhibition and you see there's a piece of work hanging on the wall, and you look at it. If it is something very simple, you'll just see it and you will walk by. But if you see that it is generating some kind of illusion, which is actually inviting you, which is so appealing that it is inviting you to get involved. And when you are mentally involved with that piece of art, you're more interested in it because that is interactive, that is generating some kind of interaction that is asking you to involve mentally. And then you will find that there are abstract art exhibitions where people are standing for 15 minutes, half an hour, even 1 hour in front of one canvas, and they are trying to figure out, they are trying to interpret things in their own ways. So that is again a success in terms of movement. Now, if we look at the Raphael's work, which was Raphael is a very famous Italian painter, and he was mostly known as his portraits in the oil medium, the opaque medium on tempera. He was part of the school of Athens. So school doesn't mean any particular institution. It is like a group of artists of a particular era who share same kind of thematic expression. So what they used to have on a broader scale, subject matter, content, the materials, technique, which used to be same. Like Raphael also had worked on fresco. So has anyone any idea what is fresco? What is the difference between a normal painting and a fresco? Any
Painting
idea?
on wet plaster.
So is it a painting or is it sculpting? Can we say it is a sculpture? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Not entirely. Why not entirely? What is that single reason which is restricting us to calling it as a proper sculpture? Some part of it looks like a sculpture, but it is not a proper sculpture. Why is that? Because it is restricted. If I give you a very simple example, there is a wall, and the same example, using plastering, you have created some kind of cemented plaster wall, which is 3D in nature, but the back portion, the rear portion of it is sticking on the wall. Unlike a sculpture, sculpture is completely free. You can actually touch all over its surfaces. It does not stick to any particular surface. So fresco has some component of a sculpture, but entirely it is not a sculpture. However, it is not a 2D thing like something which is done on a canvas or a piece of paper. So fresco is kind of a mixed thing, right? So Raphael was famous for fresco, even use of colors. Like Raphael mostly used to work with shades of browns and gray, and mostly that is the reason his paintings look like that. It is kind of gloomy and very dark. Even he had worked with various forms of lines, and there used to be sense of movement and sufficient use of spaces, optimum use of spaces. So again, when we define style, style talks about the form and composition. So now these are some of the influencing factor. So we have the various cultural style. if you look at the history of Indian art, you will find that depending upon the geographic region and the other associated factor, with varied range of culture, the painting style has some different components in it. The way people used to paint in Tanjore was different the way people used to paint in Kangra, right? Because of the cultural component that is prevalent. And the same in sculpture, painting, architecture, fashion, wherever you go, some kind of signature style, some kind of regional authenticity is there. Period style, that is again, it is highly driven by the kings or the rulers. Let's say during the Gupta period, we saw that Buddhism was at its peak, even during Ashoka's rule. So a lot of artworks has been done on the stories of Jatakas and the lifestyle of Buddha, and the particular type of painting was in focus. So again, depending upon various emperors, their priorities. So basically, the priority of the king becomes the focus area of that particular period, and this is how the art industry shaped. Also, the regional style, which is again the geometric features, cultural features, religious features, etc. So you have different influences. Group style, sometimes you will find that two separate geographic region which share some kind of common string in terms of heritage, ancestry, cultural significance, might have a particular artistic output which looks similar. For example, if you look into the Rajputana paintings and if you look into the Mughal painting, you will find there are a lot of things which are similar. However, the dressing in Mughal painting is entirely different. In Rajputana painting, it is different. But if you look at the basic anatomy, the use of space, the sense of composition, the type of color, it is kind of similar. Again, you go to if you look at the Tanjore paintings and the paintings of Amravati, which is in now Andhra Pradesh, you will find that a lot of grays and other shades which are not very bright, a lot of muted hues are used, right? Because they again share something in common. If you look into the tribal paintings, you will again find that a lot of details are there. There is something which is very famous known as Worldly paintings and Worldly of Maharashtra. There is again something famous in Orissa which belongs to the Langia Saura tribe. You will find there is a significant similarity between these two because they all share the common group style. And then you have your personal or signature style that is something very unique to each of these artists. So these are the two basic form of style. So mainly we can categorize it briefly under these two: representational and abstract. So in design, we are mostly focused on representational and the commercial, rather the commercial aspect of representational visual art, because we are not going to confuse our client as a designer. If I want to if I want to make a watch, my painting or my 3D view should resemble a watch. I'm not going to draw a bird and then I'm not going to convince my client that this bird is actually conceptualized from a watch. Nobody is going to listen to that story. So when it comes to the practical application, it is mostly visual representation of the actual thing. So which looks for there is a balance between subjective essence and the objective essence, which seeks to create recognizable subject matter. That means whatever the artist has drawn, you, even if you're not an artist, still you as a layman, you are able to understand. Like, for example, you have the landscape paintings. There is a tree, you understand that is a tree. But when it is abstract, people are putting their own interpretation, own style of representation. Some people are breaking complex things into geometric components. Some people are doing something completely of their own, and they have their own way of doing it. That is abstract, which doesn't seek for any kind of visual understanding from the viewer. There are certain abstract paintings which have hundreds of different meanings, And this is probably one of the beautiful thing about abstract painting and the reason why it is in demand. That you observe an abstract painting and it is said that it is basically your self-portrayal. The way you find out the meaning of a particular abstract painting, that shows in which direction you think, or what are your priorities, or uh, what kind of experiences you have had in your own life. So if there is something abstract for 100 different people, there can be 100 different reasons, and all of them coexist at the same time. So if we go into a bit detail of representational style, we have the realism, which again attempts to depict, to show the object as it is accurately. Then we have the naturalism. The landscape is an example, which is similar to realism, except often implies a dream subject. And then we have the illusions. So illusions is representational, but somehow it also shares some of the domain with the abstract part. It seeks to create a convincing representation of illusion of reality. So these are examples of realism, right? So if you look at it, even if you're a layman, you don't need a second person, you don't need an artist to stand beside you and explain what exactly is happening here, because it's pretty crystal clear from the picture, from the painting itself. But again, this is naturalism, so this is also very clear. So can anyone tell whether which medium has been used to make this painting? Is it a
Oil.
transparent medium or opaque medium? Is it transparent or opaque?
Opaque.
Transparent?
Anyone who's saying opaque?
Yes, sir, opaque.
So what is your logic? Why do you think it is opaque?
So because I'm getting the vibe, the earlier paintings you showed, like for the Roman Empire, they were having the similar kind of style. They were very, a little wittish, very subtle.
Yes. What else? Anything else? In terms of texture or the
Yes,
type of
yes, the
color?
texture, like it's very soothing, a little cinematic as well, but like not very clear. Like in Indian paintings, we can very clearly see the paint, but not here.
Like transparent.
No, for transparent it is separate. So someone who has answered transparent, now you tell me what are your logics. Why do you think it is transparent? Is there any specific reason why you think this is
We
transparent?
can see like the multiple layers of color.
But can that not be done using opaque medium?
So the texture seems to be very, very soft, which I feel that I mean, till up to a certain extent, it can go with opaque material, but not really till like to achieve this.
Yes, so the answer is opaque. Okay, this is made using oil, and then this is in tempera. So why this is not transparent? Because again, what she has pointed out, it is having very smooth finishes. It is, and for that you need to mix white. That is the key. Okay, that is the actual thing in transparent media. In watercolor, in some of the Indian art colleges, they will allow you to mix white for some portion, not for the entire painting. But in Western country, like I had been to UCL, I had been to other few known universities. They do not allow any use of white color. It is like using white in watercolor is a crime in Western universities. So whatever you do, water is a replacement of white, and you play with paper white. So that is one thing which tells you that this is not something very soft if it is done using the transparent media. And also you do not have much scope to show that much of intricacy, that much of detail. You'll find watercolors do not generally have such level of detailing. So you are expected to judge things from this point of view, and then only you will be able to analyze, right? So your task as a designer or as a design aspirant is to analyze, just to not mug up the painting that, okay, this is the painting and it's painted by this particular artist. No, you need to analyze this thing by understanding this factor, which are very important. Again, this is an illusion. Okay, why this is an illusion? I mean, it is not the, I mean, the way we interpret illusion, it is not the representation of the same thing. But if you look at the viewer's position, let's say you are the viewer, okay, then at which point you are standing? You are probably standing below that thing, and you are looking up. And when you're looking up, you can actually see that there is a circular periphery, circular parapet wall kind of thing, over which everyone is basically showing some kind of heavenly thing, where a lot of angels and other stuff are looking at you from the top, which is again an illusion. Then we have the abstract style, we have the non-representational, which doesn't produce any recognizable imagery, and then we have expressionism, where it plays with subjectivity, artist's own idea, feeling, or viewer's ideas, and sometimes, often, this is exaggerated to get essence. Some example, non-representational. So can anybody interpret? Do you find anything specific in it? Any similar form, anything? Anything that resembles any natural form? Somebody might say a bird, someone say a particular animal. So do you find any similarity with anything?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Well, you should. I mean, this is non-representational, so definitely you will struggle, but you might find 5-6 different things. Somebody might find different postures of human figures. Someone finds someone is dancing, etc. Right. So these are non-representational, and you can have multiple same thing which might coexist. This is expressionism. Again, a very lot of emotive value is there, and you can actually feel that some kind of negative essence is popping out of this particular piece of artwork, and there is some kind of terror, or some kind of activities going on, which is not very natural, which is not very normal, right? So that essence of expression is there. You can talk about the clouds, the way the clouds have been sequenced, the way the emotion has been portrayed on the face, even the river which is flowing. So it is self-explanatory, right? So we are done with the first part. Now we'll jump to the second part, where we'll be discussing about the historic timeline. So meanwhile, if anyone is having any doubt, please ask. So for example, if I take oil pastel as a medium, what kind of medium would that be? A transparent or an opaque?
Opaque.
Opaque, correct. If I take for example pencil colors,
Transparent.
what will that be?
Transparent.
Yes, it is transparent. If I take the markers or sketch pen,
Opaque.
Transparent.
it is transparent, right? So opaque is something which comes with a very thick creamy layer kind of a base. Okay, if I actually tell you, for tempera, back then you needed the egg white, so people used to have the color pigment. Color pigments were extracted from the various natural sources. Sometimes it is some kind of metal, sometimes it is some mineral, and they used to mix egg white and some other chemical with it, and this is how they used to generate it, right? But for the wash media, you don't need to do this thing. You can simply mix it with water and some form of chemical, and it is done. Okay, so hopefully the screen is visible.
Yes,
So we
sir.
are going to talk about, first we'll briefly talk about the prehistoric era, what people actually did inside the caves, other than inventing the wheels and fire and all. So some of the cave paintings are really famous. There are a lot of cave paintings, however, not each of them has got equal amount of recognition. But when it comes to this is a very famous work in Spain, and this is known as the Altamira. The cave is known as Altamira, and this happened somewhere between 40 grand to 2300 BC, which is the prehistoric era. So BC stands for before Christ, and so mostly their topic was very much natural. Like they used to pick stuff from their day-to-day life, um, warfare, struggling with animals, natural disasters, volcanic eruptions, their struggle, etc. And bone, blood, wood, mineral, animal skin, clay, these were some of the material. And the base was the cave, the wall, the inner surface of the cave. And then we look into the Mesopotamia, and here we saw that various kind of sculptures have been done, and they have some kind of fusion in the sculptures, some fusion between animal and uh, the human figure. Even if you look at the sphinx in the Egyptian architecture, you will find the human headed lions which are actually there. In Egypt also, you will find a lot of Egyptian deities which are sharing some part of the human body and some part of a bird or a wolf or something like that. In Greece, again, you'll find some form of paintings are there, but in form of ornamentation or mostly on the utensils. So we'll just we'll continue with this part separately, but we'll before that we'll just cover the various pieces. So let me just open that PDF first. Okay, so earlier we had talked about what exactly happened in the prehistoric era, and now we are starting with the Middle Ages. Okay, because whatever had happened between beyond 200 AD, that is not really documented in a well format. So that is very foggy to all of us. So we will start with 200 AD till 1400 AD, which is known as the medieval age or the Middle Age. So in Middle Age, society was patriarchal and people were very savage, and they had the emperor system, they had the king, and in some part of the Europe, still they were people were fighting like animals. Now, here, when we are talking about the history of art specifically, always remember that Europe has always been given the highest amount of focus. That doesn't mean that there was no art in Africa, Indian subcontinent, China, and Japan. It was there, it was coexisting. Maybe even far before Europe, Chinese and Japanese landscape painters, they started working. Even in India, in Harappan and in IBC, we found a lot of artworks which actually dated beyond the Middle Ages. But since the European history has always been in the focus, they got the limelight, the Roman Greek Empire. And USA practically had nothing original of their own. Whatever happened, whatever revolution happened in Europe, it was an outspread in the Northern America and the Southern America. And for Africa, they had their own art form in tribal cultures or in their native culture, but that has been suppressed and that has been whitewashed after repetitive colonization. So they are currently left with very little of their own thing. And again, it got influenced by the European art. So to start with that, in the Middle Age, which marks a period in class between the class and the modern history, the classical and the modern history period. And this is the time where Christianity started spreading in the Europe. And religious was considered to be one of the key influencing factor which is handling the spread and theme of the art. So if you look at this, you will find in the attire, lot of religious expressions have been there. Even the way the room has been portrayed. So it is mostly influenced by then structural societal structure and what kind of narrative has been set at that particular point of time. If we go a bit further, we have the medieval era. Again, still this is very much influenced by Christianity. Now, to just give you a very brief essence, which we'll be also discussing in detail in the for the topic of history of architecture. But Christianity, as you all know, that it was struggling at a particular phase of its fundamental stage. And there was a Gothic revival thing which actually happened before the revolution of Christianity in Europe. So Goths actually influenced the French art, and then French art started revolutionizing the rest of the Europe. And what people did, some counterpart from the Goth art was taken and it got fusioned with the Christian counterpart, and the product which they came out with become the main output of the medieval era. So if you go to French churches, you will find they are having very high, huge height. The height of the ceiling is 9 meter, 10 meter. The windows are very narrow and very high. These are all Gothic influences. Even if you look at the dressing, the color, stained glasses, glasses have actually been painted, and various pictograms are depicted, which are mostly based on Christ and his life and various gospels of Bible. So it is the part of the medieval artwork. Then we had seen the Byzantine work. So still Christianity is spreading slowly. It is not on its peak. And Byzantine. So can anyone say what is the present geographic location of Byzantine? Which country is it specifically? Just like Italy is Rome. So which country represents Byzantine?
Rome.
Any idea? No, not Rome. Rome is the present-day Italy. So it is Turkey, right? So Constantinople, it was another name of Byzantine emperor. Constantinople is presently known as Istanbul. So that entire area around Turkey, Jordan, it was representative of Byzantine at that particular that point of time. Okay, someone is asking what is Gothic era. So if I briefly describe Gothic, the term Gothic comes from the word Goth. Goth means ferocious. Goth was a nomad tribe. So what happened before Christianity? There were a lot of societal differences, economic differences in Europe, and the society was highly polarized. So those who were rich, they become very rich, and those who were poor, they become very poor, and they became so poor that they are neglected. Okay, they were not considered for any kind of societal inclusion at that point of time, and that became a rebel. So these people tired up, and they become the Goths, and they are the actual tribe people who started what they started doing. They just like the Afghan nomads, you will find they used to visit various places and they used to loot. So these Goths also used to loot various parts of Europe, and they were so powerful and they were so strategized in their warfare that they used to win. And so all these emperors were scared of these Goths, and this Goth used to put themselves with a lot of strange stuff, which, and the ultimate idea was to scare the enemy. From that entire thing, the Gothic culture came, and later, France was the first country who officially accepted Goths as a part of their society. And since then, all the other European countries, then Britain, Germany, Switzerland, they also accepted Goth, and their artistic expression, architectural expression was so popular, so dominating that it got fused with Christianity, and finally all the churches and everything, it has become a mainstream thing in the art form and the architectural representation. So that is basically the Goth. Now then we have seen the Romanesque era. So again here they have followed the same tradition, and then this is Gothic, just what we have discussed. So you can see the kind of dressing they had, the very medieval era things. And even if you can look at this thing, sharp height, sharp edges, high doors. So you can just imagine that this is the size of a small human figure standing there, and this is the height of the door, which is almost 10 times of your own height, right? So that was a special feature of Goth. Then we had the Renaissance. Again, during Renaissance era, this period is known as the rebirth, because here a lot of conventional aspects in terms of finance were broken into pieces, and people actually started believing, actually started digging more into the newer technique. And this is a very common trend that you will find throughout the entire timeline of the history. Uh, Nothing stays very longer in the timeline of history, max for 50 years or 70 years, and then people get tired of it and people start searching for something new. That is very basic human psychology. Trends keep on changing, and it is not an exception in case of history of art. So when people are done with the medieval art form, Gothic art form, they were just so saturated, they felt like we need something new. And Renaissance was the time where the rebirth of new ideas, rebirth of new concepts happened, and the good concepts got accepted, and that became the official form of Renaissance. So these are some of the product of this particular era. This sculpture is very famous. It's in Italy, again done by Michelangelo, who's an artist, sculptor, and an architect. Then this is also a very famous painting known by Raphael. So these all are there in your study material, and you need to remember them in detail. Here I'll be covering some part of it because it is not possible to cover all the paintings, but I highly recommend that you go through your study material and remember the painting and the name of the artist. And this is again Mona Lisa as a product of this particular era. So these are some of the known painters of this era: Raphael, Vinci, Michelangelo, and Botticelli. So can anyone say this is a part of a very famous painting? Can anyone say the name of the painting?
The birth of Aphrodite.
Partially correct. But this is something else. Anyone else? It's a very famous painting, one of the most common questions.
So, Birth of Venus?
Yes, Birth of Venus. So you may also find some type of question like this, where some part of the painting will be taken and they will ask you, this has been taken from which painting? Then you need to identify. That is the reason observation is important. Then we have the Baroque era, which is the 1600 till 1775. And in Baroque era, again, this period can be characterized as art that conveys a religious theme. And in Baroque era, actually, Christianity got accepted as an official religion, official state religion, right? And once a particular religion gets recognition from the emperor, it starts flourishing because it needs money. It needs a lot of infrastructure and resources to flourish a particular religion. In Indian context, if you see the historic timeline of Buddhism, you'll find that day Ashok and other Gupta king actually accepted Buddhism as the official religion. Once the kings got converted, there was exponential spread. Before that, it was not that much. But since the king started funding, they started sending the messengers to spread the religion. It happened very fast. So this is again some of the features of the Baroque work. You'll find a lot of greys and blacks. Actually, so I'll tell you the key features by looking at which you can identify. But sometimes you will also find that Gothic and Baroque are looking somewhat similar, because in Gothic also you find a lot of use of black and gray. But in Baroque, what is so special is that you can distinguish by looking at the dressing sense. They were very sophisticated, detailed, well intricate dressing. In Goth, it is kind of, since Goth comes of a culture of barbarism, they were not that sophisticated. They were not so well tailored, right? So this is one aspect that you can differentiate. They are having this kind of hats and all, so that sense of sophistication, sovereignty, that was not there in Goth. They are very natural. Then we have something called mannerism. So following in traditions developed by the Renaissance and Baroque artists, mannerism is a period in which artists created images of elongated and slightly disproportionate figure. So this is how you identify a piece of work which belongs to this particular era or this particular theme. You will find some kind of disproportion is there when it comes to the human figure. So here you can see the hand. This part is very longer. It is way too longer. If you look at the distance between the shoulder till the elbow, it is very long, right? So some kind of, even here also, this distance. So some kind of disproportionate thing will be there. And the reason, when the painters were interviewed back then, why you were doing so, they said that to attract viewers' attention. They said that if I'm drawing it as it is, then nobody will look at it, because they'll feel like they're just looking like a mirror, they're looking like in a photograph or something. So there has to be something different. There has to be something special, which will raise a sense of question among the viewer, and then only they will stand in front of your paintings for 5 minutes, and then they will ask why this part is not matching, why this part is so long. So to involve the viewer, some kind of defect, disproportionate feature were added. Then we have something called the Rococo. Again, Italy was the motherland of this particular theme. So in Rococo, you'll find that, keeping in tradition with Baroque art, Rococo was a period of ornate interior. So this is one way of identifying it. In Rococo, if it is an interior view, a palace or anything, you'll find huge amount of intricate detailings are there. In ceiling, there are so many miniature paintings. There are multiple gems and jewels which are actually engraved on wall surfaces. There are so many sculptures, motifs, frescoes. It is so ornamented. So that is representative of Rococo. When it comes to the exterior or the landscaping, here also you will find the leaves of the tree. They are very small in size. They are very miniature. And you will find the clouds are also broken down into small pieces. In Rococo, you will never find there is a huge chunk or a volume of cloud. In Rococo, you will always found the snowy small pieces of cloud. From the beautiful frescoes to the lavish furniture, Rococo was a period of royal luxury. So you need to remember this keyword. Rococo stands for royal luxury, and that is the reason they showed intricacy. If you have money, you can spend on intricacy. If you don't have money, there is no question of intricacy. Okay, if you have 50 lakhs, if your budget is 50 lakh and you are going to make a house, you will not have much scope to do any kind of interior work or any kind of intricacy. But if you have a budget of 10 crore, you will do a very good interior work. You'll have a lot of sculpture, a lot of intricate design. So it talks about sense of lavishness or the royal luxury. And then we have the neoclassicism, which is between 1700 to 1800. And this is again talks about the reformation of art and architecture. Neoclassical art sought to bring back classical elements of ancient Greek and Romans. Art is now moving away from decorative and ornate Baroque and Rococo style. So the same thing that I have said earlier, once you overdo something, people get tired of it. Okay, so in Rococo also, so much of intricacy was applied. After some time, people got tired. They got oversaturated with unnecessary amount of over emphasis on intricacy. And then people said, let us discard intricacies and let us focus on something new. So every time in the historic timeline, people needed something refreshing. So again, you will find a lot of similarities with the Gothic thing. They're not very well dressed. They're absolutely not luxurious. The palace is very simple, very plain surface, no extra floral texture, no gem engraving, nothing is done. The dressing is also very moderate, very medieval. They're not showing, if you look at the Baroque style, they had this kind of hat and the intricate details in the gown that is also not there. Even religious influence, any religious significance is also not there in terms of the dressing. So that is one way of remembering neoclassic piece of work. Art was now moving away from the decorative and the ornate Baroque style and the Rococo. And finally, then in the 1700 and the 1800, we had witnessed Romanticism and Realism. Now, you should remember that this is the actual phase where the modern artistic intervention started in Europe from the 1700s. So here, Romanticism marks a period in which artists sought to remove themselves from social and political influence. Again, you have to understand what is the reason why the Romanticism came into place. Because beyond that phase, till 1690, society was so politically hindered, changing in emperors, changing in ideologies, changes in religion, okay, changes in morals, changes in societal hierarchy and structure. These have so negatively influenced the artists that they felt claustrophobic. They got traumatized by a lot of secondary pressures on them. And finally, they gave up and they said, let's do something which is completely out of the box. So the concept of Romanticism came from there. They started romanticizing. Romanticism stands for imagination here. So they started romanticizing various scenic views, various heavenly contexts, something which is very positive, something which gives you a ray of hope. So Romanticism become famous overnight because these helps you to lead yourself in a positive path. And along with that, realism also came along with romanticism, because without realism you will not be able to express anything in terms of fairy telling or in terms of fantasy portraying. So for that, realism came, and along with that, opaque techniques like tempera, gouache, they were also simultaneously developed. Artists were interested in creating images that engage strong emotion within the beauty of a natural environment, which was way, way far from any kind of political or societal influence. Even religious influence were also taken off. These are realism. You can see now realism was the first, this was the first thematic era where people started making photogenic painting. These days you find a lot of Instagram reels where people are making ultra realistic painting, which are actually photogenic. um, Officially, realism was the era where this concept, this kind of work, people started investigating upon. In response to the emotion of romanticism, artists instead began to create images that depicted objective reality. This is objective reality. There is no, there is very less subjective reality to it. That means it is completely representational. If it is about two girls are standing in a garden holding something in their hand, that is it, and they have a lot of flowers around them. That is it. There is no hidden symbolic expression. There is no metaphor. There is no visual metaphor. Nothing like that. So this is objective. A focus on real life scenes characterized the real style. Then we have Impressionism. From 1886 till 1906, and this basically developed in France, and this period is characterized by the vivid colors and loose visible brushwork. These are the characteristic features that you should remember: vivid color, very high saturation value, least use of black and gray, bright color, bright hues, and visible brushwork. Right? If you remember the landscape painting that I showed, someone had answered that it is looking very soft because there was no visible brush mark. But for Impressionism, the key feature is you can see these scratches, which are basically the imprints of the brush mark. Artists began to investigate the changing properties of the light in every subject matter. So Impressionism was the first phase where people started investigating in light and shadow. Before that, till that, in Rococo, Baroque, light and shadow didn't play a good role. But here in Impression, light and shadow were also added. So these are some of the works. This is done by Manet. This is done by Monet. Claude Monet is different. Manet is different. So do remember them separately. This is done by Degas. These are all there in your study material, so you can refer to these images and you can find out if there's any specific name. These are some other works done by Renier. After Impressionism, we have the era of Post-Impressionism, and this is again one of the very famous eras, and this is one of the very famous paintings. So what is the name of this painting?
The Starry Night.
Starry Night.
Starry Night. By whom?
Vincent van Gogh.
Vincent van Gogh, correct. And again, what is so special about this piece of art? Why there is such craze in social media, in the digital art industry? What is so special?
So I feel it's because of the way like you can see the visible brush strokes, how they're moving, and the contrasting colors used.
Yes, quite close. What else? There are multiple reasons actually. This is one of the correct reasons. Anything else?
He painted this from his memory.
That is fine. That is not one of the prime factors. That is fine. Artists mostly either they used to paint on real time or from the memory. That's a generalized thing.
But he was in
Everything
asylum
else,
when he painted this.
yes. So can you interpret that when someone is in asylum and when someone is painting something like this, is there any linkage between the
So that
kind of
showed, so his art style is known to have showed his mental state.
okay, so
In a lot of his
what
work.
kind of mental state?
So he was, I think, he was, matlab, he wasn't really mentally stable. Uh, it was more of, I feel, this amnesia. If I'm not sure, or I'm not completely sure.
So you will find that there is one illusion where a circular disc is rotating, and it is there in the Van Gogh Museum, and they will first ask you to look at this for 30 seconds, and they will ask you to look at the painting Starry Night, and you find that all these clouds, which are kind of in a spiral way, it starts moving. Okay, you will find that these clouds are moving in a spiral path, and it creates some kind of illusion. That spiral movement actually gives birth to a lot of emotions, a lot of extreme emotions, in terms of extreme peace or extreme disturbance, boundary level emotion. So that is the reason this painting is so famous, because it deals with extreme psychological state of the viewer. If you are really good at analyzing, if you have a real good observation. So post-impressionists such as Vincent van Gogh continue to develop images with vivid color, dynamic brushstroke, real-life subject matter. This took the ideologists further as they experimented with expressive qualities of paint application and an emphasis on the geometric forms. So geometry was also there. This is some other examples of post-impressionism. Every artist has got their signature style and theme. So try to grasp that thing. What is so special? What is the signature factor about one particular artist? This is one very famous thing. It is also there in your study material done by Serot. This shows a vacation on a weekend, and this is done by Gauguin. This is done by Lautrec. This is again done by Van Gogh. So if you look at the works of Van Gogh, you will be able to establish a common thread, which is there in all of his works. Then finally, we had the modern art movement, which started from 1880 onwards till 1970, and these are the phases of modern art: expressionism, fauvism, cubism, futurism, Dada, surrealism, abstract expressionism, action painting, color field, pop art, minimalism, and op art. And lastly, we have the phase which is currently going on, which is experimental, interdisciplinary phase of art. So between 1900 till 1910, we had witnessed German expressionism, and these are some of the works. This is done by Munch, which we have already discussed. This is done by W. Kandinsky, which is again a very famous work. So this was shown, this was treated as a beginning of the cultural reform of art and poetry in Germany. And if you know that the Bauhaus School of Art is responsible for most of the artistic activities, artistic revolution, which happened in the country, and it also influenced rest of the Europe and your USA. So during this phase, the term called avant-garde this came in place, right? And this was again a German ideology, and artists became interested in depicting an emotional experience rather than reality-based imagery. So you will find these two are in a sharp contrast with realism. In realism, what you see is what it is, but here beyond the representative visual, there is also symbolic expression. There is some visual metaphor. 1905 till 1907, you have Fauvism. You can see that the work of Fauvism, they mostly come with very vivid colors and very high saturation value. Use of colors like pink and violet, purple, magenta, red, yellow, lemon yellow, and yellow ochre, jambо yellow, they're often very much used in Fauvism. So this is the French word of wild beast, become a period where artists keep in tradition with Impressionism style while exploring the color and painterly qualities within their work. So just because they were exploring the color, a lot of experiments have been done. Then we had Cubism. Between 1908 till 1914. So Pablo Picasso was one of the pioneer artists who actually who is considered to be the forebearer of this form, Cubism. And Cubism was just not there in art; it influenced fashion industry, architecture, sculpting industry, everything. And also George Braque was there. And the very basic concept of Cubism was to create some kind of elusive emphasis by parting a complex geometry into simple harmonic geometric composition. A complex form has been broken into small pieces of known rigid geometries. So you can see the faces are triangular, rectangular, the eyes are circular. So not much of detail is there. This is not realistic at all. This is again representational, and there are a lot of symbolic values. If you look at this is again something that deals with illusion. You might find two faces are placed parallelly. You might also find that these are two eyes which belongs to one common face. That is again an illusion. These are characterized by broken resemblance and abstract form. Cubism transformed art into unique modern style. Then you have after Cubism, you have Futurism, 1909 till 1918, and it is also a kind of experimental phase. And you will find mostly there are two categories in the art market. Some people appreciate the representative art forms very much because they say that they don't understand what is the meaning of abstract art. There are some people who say abstract art is greater than the representational value. That depends upon the nature. But in the phase of futurism, you can see a fusion of representational works and the abstract art, and people really went to some crazy creative extents, and they came up with a lot of fusion works. So originating in Italy, the style of art sought to transform how we see old forms in new innovative ways, and the futurists explored every medium of art, so nothing was left. Even you will find that in India, Abanindranath Tagore got very much inspired from futurism, and he came up with a new art form here, which is known as Kutum Katum. So Kutum Katum was an art form where all the discarded material, garbage, household discards and industrial discards, metal scraps, plastics, etc., were used, and they compiled it. They made sculptures and beautiful pieces of work. So some kind of experiments have also done during futurism. And then finally we had Dada. So this is again happened between 1916 and 1923. So a cultural movement rooted in Switzerland. Dada was a response to the seriousness of war. So it is, you can say this is the historic version of modern day meme, which has a lot of humor in it. And this was just to oppose, just to ridicule, just to comprehend the needlessness of wars, needlessness of narrow politics which are taking place at that particular time. And what they did, artists in Dada, they have taken certain well-known, well-recognized piece of art, and they added some element of ridicule purposefully, and they came up with a very robust, very laughable output, which was actually in contrast to the seriousness of the then societal atmosphere. Secondly, rejecting the traditional standard. So artists are always creative. They don't like to be questioned. They don't like limitations and boundaries. So when artists were working under political leaders and emperors, they somehow felt that lot of restrictions, lot of guidelines have been put upon them, even though the emperor or the politician have absolutely no idea about the art form. Still they used to kind of dominate or regulate, or they wanted to manipulate the artists. And due to this claustrophobia, they felt that they need to have something more free, they need to have a more free ground to express them freely. So Dada gave them this uh, rehab basically, which helped them to revive and again started thinking in a creative way. So Dada artists found art and humor in the meaningless objective of everyday life. Dada art is characterized as anti-war or anti-art. This was a product of World War, by the way, the product of First World War. Dada was a foundation for future art movement such as surrealism and pop art. So it is very easy to recognize which is uh, Dada and which is Fauvism and other things. And then we have surrealism, which happened between 1924 and 1940. So this is also having a very unique characters, and you can actually see that the various aspects of it. For example, surrealism talks about something which is not real. So what is surreal? Something which is not real. It also gives birth to various illusion. It also raises a lot of questions. Sometimes these questions are to the society, to the emperor, sometimes to the people itself. So for example, a rose out of nowhere floating on the sky. So this has a lot of symbolic expression. Surrealist walks are far away from the reality, but they have a lot of symbolic meaning, right? So in design also, there are a lot of surrealistic walks which are appreciated. Uh, Surrealism become a way for artists to create unique world of an imagined reality. Some artists were very good at making portraits and capturing scenic landscape views. Some artists were more into the counterpart of it, which was the imaginary context. They love to live in the world of fantasy, the world of imagination, and this sect of artists actually were involved in surrealism, which gave us a kind of utopian setup. Artists such as Salvador Dali experimented with reality and psychological element, which is very research oriented. So when you show that the clocks are actually hanging like a piece of paper or a piece of cloth on the branch of the tree, and it is fallen on the ground, so can anyone interpret what does it exactly show? In exam, you might have a question like this. They will show you any piece of work and they will ask you to pick the right option, which is interpreted in that work. So what does it show exactly? Any idea? Anyone? Why these clocks are hanging?
Like time always passes by, it never waits for anyone.
Yes, one of the true answers.
Like fluidity of time.
Yes. Anything else? Do you find any any symbolic expression which is in form of rebel or which is in form of protest?
Sir, is the timer resting?
Yes, you can also say that it is being paused, or you can say that the time has deteriorated. If you look at the background, actually, you can interpret there is a tree, but you have only the trunk and you have no canopy. So the green canopy of a tree is actually represents the life, the living essence, the vitality. And if you look at the rest of the area, it is kind of dried up. There is no green, absolutely no green, right? You can see the sky is kind of yellowish, not bluish, which tells that the ongoing situations are not very good, they're not very much in favor of the people. So the painting talks about then scenario, that particular era. So again, you can see the time is, the year is 1940, Second World War, 1939. So you can see why this kind of things have happened. Then we have abstract expressionism. So here, this is again a post-war movement, right? So you should be able to identify these linkages. World War had a lot of terrible traumas for people. It has traumatized generations after generations. Whoever had witnessed this, even those who have not witnessed, their grandparents and parents, in form of stories, they used to describe these things, and still for the future generation also, 2-3 next generations have also got traumatized by the horrors of the World War, right? So here abstract expressionism is known for its spontaneousness and subconscious style. Instead of working with representational form, and abstract expressionism works interpret emotional intensity as well. So you can see fires and fiery smokes and flames, which is covered. And this basically specifically talks about a situation, a state of emergency, something which is not favorable. The 1950 till onwards, it is a part of experiment which is still going on. This is known as the action painting, also known as the gestural abstraction. This unique style of painting explores the application and expression of medium. Jackson Pollock is known as the quintessential action painter. Drips, drizzles, and splatters, these are the techniques. So you'll find these things in social media a lot. Some people is throwing a bucket of paint on a huge wall or a canvas. Some people are dipping their paintbrushes in paint, and they are just simply wiping it off at the canvas, and there are a lot of overlaps and pattern, and then with a piece of cloth they are mixing something and they're coming up with some painting. This is all form of the modern experimentalism. These are known as the color filled painting, right? So these are nothing but solid color, solid geometrical, or sometimes it is organic. Here you can see it is having a specific geometry, square shaped or the rectangular shaped geometries, and then you have the organic shapes here. But the main thing is you have a bounded region which is filled with one single color without any tonal or gradient change. So this originating in New York City, and this abstract form of painting is also known by its application of flat fills of color, and a focus on a refined and consistent application of paint is also characterized by this style. And finally, we see the pop art it
Excuse me,
started in the
sir.
1950s. Yes.
So what do they express by, like a single tone of color?
What do they express?
Yes, through that.
It expresses emotion. Okay, one particular solid patch of color, when I'm showing you red, it talks about, it might talk about anger, fear, or something which is very borderline. When I'm showing you yellow, it is something very stable yet positive. When I'm showing you a mix of green and blue here, it gives you an essence of art. At the same time, it is balanced. But since these are part of abstract painting, for 100 people, it can have 100 different meanings. So there is nothing called what exactly does it represent. It is subjective. Unlike realism, it is not objective. So this is one way I interpret this thing. In some other way, you can also interpret. Some people, if you look at the Mondrian experiments, he has played with a lot of rectangles and lot of squares. That is based on mathematical derivation. So people start visually comparing the various proportions and scales, the side lengths, and then they try to find out if there is any correlation between multiple components in the painting or not. So since they are all output of abstract, you can interpret it in your own way, but there is not a single or a common way. There are multiple techniques. For pop art in 1950s, again emerging in the Britain, in the 1950s, pop art explored the influences of popular culture. So the same kind of essence that you can see here. And in the printing industry, in Intaglio, a lot of application of pop art has been done. And these influences of the popular culture, such as advertising, comic book, cultural objects. And why it is so famous in advertisement and comic book? Because you have contrasting bright colors. These bright colors were able to catch immediate attention, right? Like yellow hair is something very unconventional. So when you see someone with a yellow hair, it is very easy for that person to grab the attention. And that is the main motto of any advertising agency. They want you to read, they want you to see their product and to read their caption or their marketing features, etc. Pop art was innovative in that it was the first style of art to emerge that used mass-produced imagery in a finite context. So when we are talking about the printing media, and we are also talking about mass production. So for example, a comic book, when there was no printer, people used to engrave something on a hard surface, be it a leather surface or a stone surface, and just like you have the rubber padded stamp, they just used to put that in a liquid or a color, and just like stamp, they used to produce multiple copies of it, so which made the entire production process, publishing process very fast. 1960, the minimalistic Mondrian style that I was talking about, it is again a post World War II thing. So again here there is no single way of interpreting it. So this is a mathematical derivation. The artist who gave birth to this belonged to China, who was a mathematician as well as an artist. So he used to play with this proportion and the various segments of geometry. Minimalism is known as a reaction against abstract expression. So when we talk about abstract expression, for example, this is an example of abstract expression. You have so many things. Some people might find this to be chaotic, so messy, so complex. You have lakhs of things superimposing over each other. In contrast to that, in sharp contrast to that, this is the example of minimalism, which is abstract. At the same time, it doesn't have much level of complexity. Some complexity is there, but compared to the previous one, it is very, very minimalistic and less complex. And then we have the op art, which plays with the optical illusion. Artists such as the Vasarely and Riley sought to explore the illusion of space. So it is one single space. However, you see the volumetric expansion is happening in a spherical way at the central part. The result is an impression of movement, vibration, swelling, wrapping, hidden imagery, etc. Here you can see this appears to be moving, but this is nothing but the manipulation of a surface, and it seems that this part is kind of popping down in that area. But this is nothing but the surface manipulation. 1970 till present, this is a postmodern artwork. This is continuing till date. Artists work in a variety of medium, including drawing, painting, sculpture, mixed media, collage, print making, photo making, photography, ceramics, installation, sometimes all at the same time. So you'll find that in photography, you have captured nice sunset. So what the artists have done, the artist have kept the sky, the horizon portion of the photography, and he has removed the water part and he has painted that water part. So that is a mix of a photography and a painting, which is again a postmodern output. So these are some examples. This is a postmodern feature using trees and all. They have sculpted this. These are again some of the visual representation. Here you can see the use of cubism. These are again some modern sculptures and modern furnitures. These are all product of cubism and minimalism. So these are some examples. So with this, we sum up the first topic, which was the history of art. However, I would suggest that you go through the major artists and their works, which is there in your study material in a tabular format, probably in book 3. At the very beginning of the artistry, there are few tables in your book. Do study those tables. Remember the name of the artist, remember the visual of his painting, and also remember the timeline if possible. Timeline is not a priority, but you prioritize the name of the artist and the piece of work. So this concludes the session. Now, if anyone is having any doubt, please ask. Okay, someone raised a hand. Yes, ask.
Good evening, sir. So my doubt is, what is the difference between Dadaism and Surrealism, sir? If you can explain it in a more detailed way.
Surrealism and what is the other one?
Dadaism.
Dadaism has got humor. Surrealism doesn't have humor. Surrealism is imaginary. Surrealism will show you imaginative things, which are kind of rebel. Okay, rebel without any humor. Dadaism is also a rebel, but using humor. So it is like you are protesting something using a meme, that is Dadaism. If you are protesting something by showing some descriptive format, then that is your surrealism. Surrealism also gives birth to illusion. Dadaism, in Dadaism, there is no illusion. And Dadaism is always done mostly based on any popular artwork which has previously been done. Surrealism is a complete new piece of artwork. Understood?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Any other doubts? Okay, so if there is no doubt, then we can close the session here. Thank you for attending, and we'll be continuing the second part of it, which is the embroidery and the crafts in tomorrow's class.